Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're diving into the life of a historical figure whose story literally reads like a massive, cinematic three-act movie. We're talking about Sri Aurobindo. This is a guy who completely reinvented himself, not once, not twice, but multiple times throughout his life. He went from being an elite, Cambridge-educated scholar to an underground revolutionary, and then, ultimately, to a massive global spiritual icon. Okay, let's dive into this, because you really have to wonder, how in the world does someone go from actively plotting against the British Empire to sitting in quiet contemplation, writing some of the most profound spiritual philosophy of the 20th century, right? It's a huge paradox. To understand this incredible pivot, we really have to start at the very beginning of his story. And actually, it's a beginning that was completely engineered by his father. Act 1, The Accidental Englishman.
Tracing his early timeline, we enter an era where Aurobindo's Indian heritage was deliberately hidden from him. Born in Calcutta in 1872, his father, who was a physician and had studied in Scotland, firmly believed that British culture was just vastly superior, so he intentionally distanced his sons from their own heritage. By the time Aurobindo was just 7 years old, he was literally shipped off to England to be molded into the perfect Western scholar. He went through St. Paul's School in London and eventually snagged a scholarship to King's College, Cambridge. It is this profound geographical and cultural whiplash. You have an Indian boy completely disconnected from his roots, mastering the absolute highest levels of European classical culture.
And when I say mastering, I mean it. By the turn of the century, Aurobindo was proficient in at least 12 languages. 12! We're talking English, Latin, Greek, and French, alongside being pretty familiar with German and Italian. It was actually only later on, almost as an act of reclaiming his own identity, that he taught himself Sanskrit and his native Bengali. So he was a certified linguistic genius, totally being groomed for the elite Indian civil service. But you know what? He purposely disqualified himself by just not showing up for the mandatory horse riding exam. He clearly had a completely different destiny in mind.
Act 2, The Radical Nationalist.
So when he returned to India in 1893, a massive transformation began to unfold. Now, on the surface, Aurobindo lived the life of a respectable academic and bureaucrat. He joined the state service in Baroda and eventually became the vice principal of Baroda College. But in secret, he was transforming into a fierce Indian revolutionary. He traveled all over, secretly establishing underground resistance groups and helped form the Anushilan Samiti, which was this network of revolutionary youth clubs. He eventually moved to Calcutta and began editing a highly influential nationalist newspaper called Bande Matram, openly advocating for complete independence from British rule. He was leading a total double life here, a quiet, respectable scholar by day and a revolutionary mastermind by night. But this double life inevitably caught up with him. In 1908, a bomb plot targeting a British magistrate went terribly wrong and tragically killed 2 innocent women. Aurobindo was arrested on charges of planning the attack and was thrown into solitary confinement in Alipore jail. This was the absolute climax of his political career. He was facing trial for treason, isolated in a dark cell for an entire year. But surprisingly, instead of breaking him, this prison sentence became the ultimate pivot point of his entire existence.
Act 3, The Prison Epiphany.
In the darkness of solitary confinement, Aurobindo experienced a profound epiphany that completely shattered his previous worldview. He later recalled, "It is a fact that I was hearing constantly the voice of Vivekananda speaking to me for a fortnight in the jail in my solitary meditation. This wasn't just some fleeting moment of peace. It was a radical, fundamental shift in his consciousness." He realized then that his aim had to go far, far beyond just the political liberation of a single country. Ultimately, he was acquitted and released from prison in 1909, but the revolutionary who walked into that cell was absolutely not the man who walked out. His new framework perfectly illustrates a massive philosophical leap. While traditional interpretations of yoga often view the physical world as an illusion or maya, something to be escaped in order to find spiritual liberation, Aurobindo proposed the exact opposite. He didn't want to escape reality. He argued that the world is a divine play, and the goal of spiritual practice shouldn't just be to flee into a trance somewhere, but rather to bring the divine down into matter to actively transform human existence right here on Earth. Act 4, The Philosophy of Integral Yoga. To pursue this new path, he made a huge decision. He completely abandoned politics, evaded British authorities, and retreated to the French colony of Pondicherry in 1910. There, he met a French mystic named Mira Alfassa, who would later become known as the Mother. Together, they mapped out integral yoga. As a spiritual practice, it aims not just for personal liberation, but for the physical, mental, and spiritual transformation of human consciousness on Earth. It's an incredibly holistic practice. It's not about retreating to a cave on a mountain. It's about an active, dynamic evolution of consciousness. He fundamentally believed that just as humanity had evolved from animal species, we are currently just a transitional species meant to evolve into something much, much higher. Let's look at how this builds, because these distinct stages really form the core of his metaphysical system. According to Aurobindo, evolution is basically the divine slowly waking up in the physical world. It started with unconscious matter. From matter evolved life. Then from life evolved mind, which, is where humans are right now. But the journey isn't over. The next step in our evolution is what he called the supermind. This is a truth consciousness, a state that is completely free from human ignorance and division. And that brings us to his absolute most famous axiom, all life is yoga. Because think about it, if the goal is to transform human existence and bring down this supermind consciousness, you can't just meditate for an hour in the morning and then go be a terrible person for the rest of the day, right? To Aurobindo, spiritual realization must actively influence your everyday thoughts, your work, your relationships, your actions. Every single breath, every mundane task you do is a vital part of this evolutionary yoga. This holistic approach heavily influenced his pioneering views on integral education. He and the mother firmly believed that true education couldn't just be about cramming facts into the mind. It has to be a perfectly balanced growth of the entire human being. We're talking about training the physical body, refining the emotions, building a really strong moral character, and awakening the spirit all at the exact same time. Act 5. A Global Legacy. Sri Aurobindo spent the next 4 decades mostly in his room in Pondicherry, rarely coming out. Yet his intellectual output was just staggering, and his influence rippled across the entire globe. He created a massive literary corpus that beautifully synthesized Eastern mysticism with Western philosophy. I mean, this work led to Nobel Prize nominations in both literature and peace. The Life Divine laid out his vast theories on evolution, while the synthesis of yoga provided the practical manual. And then his absolute masterpiece was Savitri, a 24,000-line epic spiritual poem in blank verse that he literally constantly revised for the rest of his life, deeply exploring themes of love, death, and divine consciousness. And his work didn't just stay on the page, far from it. In 1926, the Sri Aurobindo Ashram was officially established to guide the growing number of disciples flocking to him. His teachings also directly inspired Auroville, an international experimental township dedicated entirely to human unity. Plus, scholars continually note his profound influence on the human potential movement in the West and the development of modern integral psychology. Thinkers and philosophers all over the world still cite his vision of evolutionary consciousness as a major inspiration. So, what does this all mean? The crucial point is this. Sri Aurobindo wasn't just a scholar, or a revolutionary, or a mystic. He was a true visionary who believed that humanity's greatest chapter is still unwritten. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought to consider today. If all life is yoga, as Aurobindo taught, how will you bring a higher, transformed consciousness into your everyday actions? It's a profound challenge to us all. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.